I don't know how he did this, but at least in the culture that I'm in, we've developed a conception of God that is has subtracted suffering out of that conception. That suffering is the antithesis of the presence of God. That if there is the presence of suffering, that it a priori automatically means that God is not there. And that the epitome of God is the release of all suffering, and we have triumph and victory and total ecstasy and that sort of thing. And so we've got that set up in our minds. And so every time we see suffering or experience suffering, we get very betrayed and angry that God left us, because that's just the only way we know how to think. And I don't know how he did that, because it's not really even in the books. It's not anywhere on the planet. There's nothing about that to demonstrate that has anything to do with reality or God. And I have a note that is attributed to Carl Jung that says, all suffering is the suffering of God. I tried to look that up. I didn't see that direct quote as being by him, but Carl Jung did wrestle with the experience of suffering on behalf of other people as well, because of course he studied and worked with people with mental health issues in his day, and so he had a lot to ponder on and express in that vein. You know, it's not the only place that we can see this image, but perhaps it's the clearest place that we can see this image in the images of Jesus on the cross and the name we give him of God. We see the suffering God. We see that. It's right there in our faces, but it's like we have blinders over to see that. And because there is the second portion, which is the rising from the tomb, and we like to concentrate on that, but it's all God. The suffering part is God. And some of the times when I have suffered the most is when I have learned the most and been given my knowledge and had God open to me. I consider a lot of my journey a journey to know God. And that journey where I knew God was not in my successes, it was in my downfalls and in my sufferings. And it's all medicine, it's all gifts, it's all treasure. I don't think that means we need to ask for suffering or go after it. There's plenty to go around. And also there's pain and suffering are not the same thing. Struggle and suffering are not the same thing. And again, in our pain and in our struggles, we can meet God. And we can do pain without suffering. I've done it. And that's much later on. Earlier on, I couldn't. But there came a point where I had, for example, a year-long passage of physical pain, which I had not had much physical pain up to that point in my life. I'd had other pains, emotional pains, but I hadn't had a lot of physical pain. But I think it was 2013, I had a passage about a year long of some very intense physical pain that just never let up for a whole year. And I was in a good position. Again, it was in a position where I said, well, I need to use my tools. I need to use, I don't want to, I want to know what I'm doing here. How do I say it? I want to get the medicine from this. And so I tried very hard to find, I just surrendered to that pain is what it was. I didn't overcome it. I was on the floor. I didn't get up and put on a brave face. I was writhing on the floor. But that's all I needed to do at that moment. And the veil became very thin. I was able to have a deeper sense of the people on the other side of the veil. We call them spirits, but they're just people. that were helping me and loving me. That veil became thin because of the pain. So I'm just saying some things that I kind of experienced, meaning that it was painful, but I wasn't suffering because of the way that I understood it and the purpose that I felt that it had for me. It wasn't pleasant by any means, but I was going to God in that and not away from that. And, I know not everybody sees things this way, but you're going to figure out that I do. We are the gods and we are the devils. There are no others. That's where I'm coming from. So if we're here, we're bound to the altar like Isaac was. And we do this willingly. Isaac was actually willing. And I can't tell you about your journey before you came here and here. I mean, it may not be the same for everybody, but I think many of us were willing, not because it was going to be easy, because it's crazy here, right? It's crazy. It's like watching somebody go around on a roller coaster and saying, I want to do that. And then the difference between getting on the roller coaster and saying, oh, wait, never mind, or whatever. Of course, some people love roller coasters. I'm not that person. And that's kind of what I felt like. Like, I felt like I was excited to come here. And then when I got here, it's like, whoa, never mind. This is crazy. Get me out of here. But since I'm still here, I've learned a few more things. And God is not, his back is not turned on our suffering. There is much, much, much suffering, but his back is not turned from the suffering. He is suffering with us. He is a God in pain. He is a weeping God. And why is it that way? I don't know. Why did we decide that God in heaven meant that everything was all perfect? Like you got everything that was your way, or I call it the capitalist version of heaven, where you have, your literal house mansion with, your home theater. Like heaven is like finally getting your home theater or something, That's our list of heaven. That's what we think heaven is our list checked off. God delivered on our heavenly Amazon wish list and said, here you go, you were a good boy or good girl, so here's all the things you ever wanted. And we think that's heaven. It's not. That's not heaven. Heaven and hell is who you are. You're always carrying it with you. You are carrying your heaven and hell with you wherever you go. You don't die to go to heaven and hell. You live in heaven or hell, and usually a little bit of both, right? And you have to choose heaven. And I just use the word heaven loosely because I don't, obviously you can tell I don't think about it the way that some people do. But just that deep sense of contentment or peace, you have to choose that. That's not an accidental thing. And it's not, you do have to have integrity and make choices that, don't harm yourself and don't harm others. There are laws to it, but it's not about getting approved or having some approval or checking boxes off the list, because everybody's in a different situation and you have to live in your life and in your time and in your moments. And heaven, I think I've said this one before because it's my favorite quote. Before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. And the real power of that quote is not that heaven is in the enlightenment. Heaven is in the wood and the water. And it always was. And it always will be. We came here. This is the temple. What's happening here, including the suffering, is what we came for. To know God, which is to know ourselves. It's the same journey. And if there is suffering, it is God that is suffering, because we are that precious being, trailing clouds of glory from where we came. There's a poem on that. I'll put that in the description. So try to switch that feeling a little bit. It's all God. It's all medicine. It doesn't mean you can't have success and material things. Absolutely. I love things. I love my things. I love earrings and art and music and books. So things are good too. It's not that. You don't have to become a monk unless you want to. Do it. Go ahead. Cool. But God is in everything. He's a breath away. and He's suffering with you. He's not, it's not a sign that God is not there. Your suffering is a sign, or your pain or struggle, because you don't have to do it with suffering. You can do it just with the pain and the struggle. But if you're in that, it's the sign that God is on His way to you. He's coming to you. He's saying, meet me, and I'm going to give you my gifts. And it's the same way that God became God, is by partaking the fruit of the tree, which sent us into this realm where we gain knowledge, not information. We didn't come here to gain information. We came here to gain knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil. And we've got a lot of knowledge of everything that hurts, don't we? Nobody can take that away from you. It's knowledge that you'll always have. You'll be independent with that knowledge in this universe, wherever else you go after this. This is a very, very, very precious place. You are very, very, very precious. You're surrounded by those who love you on the other side of the veil, and you probably have people who are loving you here. I think you're cool, even though I've never met you. I hope our paths cross, and you can get a hug from me. I love you. So stick around. Don't leave the scene yet. And just realize that all suffering is the suffering of God. All crying is the crying of God. All wounds are the nails in the hands and the feet of God. The blood on His skin, the blood that wept out of His skin. That's an image. That's an image for what we are all going through on a day-to-day basis. Okay? So try to get rid of the capitalist heaven out of your head. That's nothing. There's nowhere that that's found. And try to get to that peace that you can carry with you, whether it's good coming or bad coming. You can handle it all because you know what the gift is in every moment. Take some time to get there. You can practice it like a muscle, but it's possible. And that's what I invite you to. See you soon.